First, our top story circles around an announcement by Convoy after rumors of trouble at the company led it to cutting off customers and closing its load boards. Strategic analyst JP Hampstead is here to analyze the situation. JP, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Bill. How are you guys?
Doing well.
Better than the folks at Convoy.
Yeah, glad to be here. Yeah, it's been a really interesting story, and it's something that has been sort of slowly developing. This didn't happen suddenly. We've been covering this story for about 6 weeks. First, learning the news that Convoy had hired an investment banker, Goldman Sachs, to help them sell the company. This is something at the time that the company denied. They said they were just exploring strategic options and trying to fend off the overwhelming inbound interest they had from buyers. But it was interesting, and I'll say that the salient detail from that story and from the conversations we had around the bank that was trying to buy them was that some of the potential buyers told us that Convoy had been willing to separate their brokerage and their technology platform in order to try to realize some value, knowing that the brokerage was burning cash, probably wasn't the most attractive asset, but that the carrier app especially was widely respected. And so that kind of told you that, okay, this company's not in a really favorable position to be on the market and selling itself. And then the second thing that happened was when OTR Solutions, the factor, cut them off. Convoy had, so if you recall, factors buy the receivables from truckers, which ultimately means that they're holding IOUs from brokers, right? So the truckers want to get paid fast. The factors pay the truckers fast, and then they have to collect from the brokers. So they essentially have to do credit. They have to trust that the brokers are going to pay. They have to do credit checks on the brokers. Now they had been running, a balance of I want to say between $300,000 and $500,000. Convoy had with OTR. That account bloomed up to about $800,000. OTR started getting a little skittish about their finances and said, "Hey, Convoy, we need to do a credit check. Show us your financials." Convoy said no. They said, "Okay, well then we need better payment terms. You need to start paying this down faster." Convoy said no. They pulled the plug. And then when we reported on it, we talked to some of the principals involved at OTR. Eventually learned that Convoy cut them a check for about $500,000 to get back on their nice list. At the time, Convoy said it was some simple misunderstanding that OTR had changed their terms and they were under review. But retrospectively, it seems like it was actually a sign of pretty acute financial distress.
So now we're at the point where the company says, okay, we've got a major announcement coming, and the rumor mill has been swirling. Of course, that's kind of how social media works with situations like this. Obviously, most of us think that a bankruptcy is imminent. Is that something that we're looking at, or are we looking bankruptcy versus sale?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that Dan Lewis and the C-suite and the board will probably try to do everything they can to avoid a technical bankruptcy. Whether that means selling pieces of the company for pennies on the dollar, or what's often called like an acqui-hire, where maybe some of the technologists go to work for somebody else. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that. The fact that they essentially shut down the brokerage, right, by sending everyone home, but canceling all their loads. Like they're not going to rebuild that. You wouldn't do that if you were going to sell the brokerage. But I know that they've had conversations with people like UPS, for example, about their technology. I know that they were talking to Walmart at one point. They were talking to Amazon. A potential deal with C.H. Robinson, fell through, but they're probably working up until the very last minute. To try to realize some value for their investors and their board and themselves. I've been told that at 11:30 Eastern, Dan Lewis is doing an all-hands call to everyone, kind of explaining the situation. We have eyes and ears into that, so we'll know the full story then.
Convoy at one point had 1,500 employees, I think it was the number was, and then that's been dwindling down for a little bit, down to about 500, I think, now at this point in time. As you look at that situation, obviously there was a lot of money that was invested in this from a lot of partners as well. Was this a situation where the economy basically made it fall through, or was this perhaps just like an Icarus sighting that they just flew too close to the sun and unfortunately this happened?
Yeah, I think that there were a couple of fundamental issues with the company. One is that the way that they grew was by sort of subsidizing their customers' freight. They were moving freight at negative gross margins for a very long time, and that's how they were sort of viewed by the shipper community, as this person who would like sort of take really cheap freight, and it was hard to get themselves out of that box. I also think that they didn't quite have the right sort of freight culture. And by that, I mean, for too long, they relied on the idea that if they built the best technology, they had the most attractive user experience in their platform, that the freight would just come to them. Perhaps naively, not realizing that freight brokerage is an extremely competitive industry with, people who've built their own technology and are, really trying to win freight every single day. And then there are a few other things that did it. I mean, when we talk about the economy, there are two sort of crunches coming from two different sides that have hit lots of brokerages. One is margin dollars per load essentially getting chopped in half. So, the margin dollars, the money that it takes to actually run your business, really being constrained. And at the same time, the cost of different kinds of financing, especially receivables financing, has doubled year over year. So if you think about a broker that has to pay its carriers quickly, but its customers are taking 60 or more days to pay it, a lot of times it's borrowing against its receivables. They used to be able to do that for about 0.5% or 1%. Now it's like 3%, 4%, 5%. For businesses that even when they're run well, maybe only have a 3% EBITDA margin, that pretty much destroys their earning power.
Do you think that other digital brokerages in the space who maybe rely on kind of that alternate freight culture, that kind of we built it so they will come, need to start worrying about this as well?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think that, there are other, I'm really not going to get into like naming names and speculating, but like there are other digital brokerages that had experienced freight and supply chain professionals as part of the founding teams. It's a little bit different. Convoy didn't have that, so I think that sort of culture kind of comes from the top. If you go to a freight brokerage and you see a really energetic, active floor of young people, pounding the phones, trying to win freight, negotiating very aggressively, that's something that really has to be inculcated and encouraged and fostered like every day. And it's not the same. It's not the same vibe as a Seattle technology company.
It's certainly going to be an interesting situation for us to get in and hear what's going on at 11:30 when Dan Lewis has that call there as well.
Yes, we will. We should know Convoy's final fate then.
Well, absolutely. JP, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll obviously look forward to that as well.
Thank you.